The message appeared everywhere at once. Every screen in every corner of known space lit up with the same desperate transmission. The hologram showed a being made of what looked like living crystal, its form flickering and unstable. Behind it, a world was tearing itself apart. "Please," the crystalline being said. Its voice translated into 1,000 languages simultaneously. "Our world is dying. We are the Velith. We have days, perhaps hours. The dimensional rifts are consuming everything. We have tried everything we know. We need help. Please, anyone who receives this, help us." The message ended. Space fell silent again. In the great chamber of the Galactic Council, representatives from dozens of species stared at their screens. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Finally, the Krillian ambassador stood. His species had conquered half a sector through military might. They feared nothing, or so everyone believed. "The Velith system is unstable," he said, his voice deep and rumbling. "Our scientists have analyzed the dimensional readings. Any ship that enters that area has a 90% chance of complete destruction. My people will not risk our forces for a rescue mission with such odds." The Thessian delegate nodded, her 3 eyes blinking in sequence. "We have run the calculations through our quantum computers. The probability of success is less than 6%. The dimensional anomalies are unlike anything in our databases. We cannot help them." One by one, the other species agreed. The ancient Morphean collective, beings of pure energy who had existed for millions of years, sent their response through their translator device. "We sense something fundamentally wrong about this phenomenon. It touches parts of reality that should not be touched. We will not approach." The Galactic Council reached its decision in less than an hour. The Velith would receive no help. Their distress call would be marked as a tragic loss, and the entire system would be quarantined. Some species offered to send monitoring equipment to study the collapse from a safe distance, but none would risk their people. Captain Doyen watched the entire proceeding from his station orbiting Earth. He sat in the command chair of the human vessel called Defiant Hope, a mid-sized exploration ship. His crew was small, only 30 people, but they were good at their jobs. They had to be. Humanity was new to space, barely 100 years since first contact with alien life. Most species still saw them as children playing with technology they didn't fully understand. Doyen had dark hair starting to show gray at the temples. He was 40 years old, which made him young for a captain in most alien militaries but considered experienced for humans. He had been in space for 20 years, ever since Earth joined the galactic community. He had seen many wonders and many injustices. This felt like both. "Captain," his communications officer said quietly, "the Council has officially closed the matter. No one is going to help them." Doyen stood from his chair. His crew watched him, knowing that look on his face. He walked to the communications console and opened a direct channel to the Council frequency. This would reach every ship, every station, every delegate still connected to the session. "This is Captain Doyen of the Terran Expeditionary Forces, commanding the vessel Defiant Hope. I have heard the Council's decision." He paused, looking at his own crew. They were nodding. They already knew what he was going to say. "We will respond to the Velith distress call. Humanity will not abandon them." The response was immediate. The council chamber erupted in voices, all of them expressing shock or disbelief. The Krillian ambassador's voice cut through the noise. "Captain, did you not hear the survival probability? Your species barely understands dimensional physics. This is suicide." "Maybe," Doyen said calmly. "But they asked for help. Someone has to answer." On Earth, Ambassador Jiwan was in an emergency meeting with Earth Command when the transmission came through. She was younger than Doyen, only 35, but she had negotiated 3 major treaties with alien species. She understood how the galaxy worked better than most humans. She also understood what Doyen had just done. "He's forcing our hand," one of the generals said, shaking his head. "If we don't support him, we look cowardly. If we do support him, we might lose one of our best crews." Jiwan stood, smoothing her formal diplomatic uniform. "Then we support him. Send the authorization. Captain Doyen speaks with Earth's backing." The general stared at her. "You realize this could be a disaster? The entire galaxy is watching. If we fail, humanity becomes a cautionary tale." "If we do nothing," Jiwan replied, "we become something worse. We become people who calculate the cost of doing what's right and decide it's too expensive." The authorization went out within minutes. Doyen received it and immediately began assembling volunteers. He didn't have to ask twice. His entire crew volunteered, but he needed specialists. Minseo, his chief engineer, was the first to confirm. She was a small woman with oil stains permanently under her fingernails and a mind that could solve problems other engineers called impossible. "I've been reading about dimensional physics," she told Doyen. "The other species are trying to approach this with pure logic and established science. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe this needs something different." Yun, the ship's medical officer, was next. She was tall and calm, the kind of person who never panicked even when everything was falling apart. "I took an oath to help all sentient life," she said simply. "That includes the Velith." Tajan was their specialist in theoretical physics, a young man who had graduated top of his class from Earth's best university. He looked nervous but determined. "The other species have been studying dimensional physics for thousands of years. We've been studying it for maybe 50. But sometimes a fresh perspective sees things that experts miss. I want to try." Soman was their weapons officer, though on an exploration vessel that mostly meant she was also the best pilot. She had flown through asteroid fields and solar storms. She was fearless in a way that made other crew members nervous. "Someone has to try," she said when Doyen asked her. "Might as well be us." The rest of the crew filled in around these core members. Engineers, scientists, support staff. All volunteers. All knowing the odds. As the Defiant Hope prepared to depart, other ships kept their distance. Alien crews watched the humans work with expressions that ranged from pity to confusion. The Krillians sent a message calling them brave fools. The Thessians sent mathematical models proving the mission's futility. The ancient Morpheans simply watched in silence. Jiwan transmitted one final message to Doyen before they left Earth's orbit. "The whole galaxy is watching." "No pressure." Doyen smiled at that. "We're not doing this for the galaxy. We're doing it because it's right." "I know," Jiwan said. "That's what scares them. Make us proud, Captain." The Defiant Hope's engines flared to life. The ship turned toward the distant Velith system, toward a region of space that every advanced civilization had declared too dangerous to approach. 30 humans aboard one ship heading into the unknown. Behind them, Earth held its breath. Ahead of them, a dying species waited for a miracle they had stopped believing would come. The journey would take 3 days at maximum speed. 3 days to reach a place where reality itself was breaking down. 3 days to prepare for something no amount of preparation could ready them for. But they were going. When everyone else had calculated the odds and turned away, humanity had done what it always did when someone needed help. They had answered the call. The first 2 days of travel were normal. The Defiant Hope moved through standard space lanes, passing other vessels that kept their distance. Word had spread about the human ship heading toward the Velith system. Some ships sent messages of support. Others just watched silently as the humans passed by, like people watching someone walk toward certain death. Doyen spent most of his time on the bridge, reviewing everything they knew about dimensional rifts. It wasn't much. Humanity's understanding of advanced physics was basic compared to species that had been studying the universe for millions of years. But Minseo had made a good point during their planning session. Sometimes experts were so deep in their knowledge that they couldn't see simple solutions. Tajan worked in the science lab, running simulations. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. Hyun had tried to make him rest, but he refused. "We only get one chance at this," he told her. "I need to understand what we're flying into." The problem started on the 3rd day, when they were still 6 hours from the Velith system. Tajan was the first to notice. He was staring at his instruments, frowning when his reading suddenly jumped. "Captain, I'm getting unusual readings. The space around us is starting to show minor distortions." Doyen came to look at the displays. "We're still far from the system. These shouldn't be happening yet." "I know," Tajan said, "but dimensional rifts don't follow normal rules. They're spreading. The effect is reaching out farther than the Velith probably realized. As they got closer, the distortions grew worse. The ship's sensors began giving contradictory readings. One instrument would show clear space ahead. Another would show a massive gravity well. A third would show nothing at all, as if space itself had disappeared. Minseo worked frantically in engineering, trying to keep their system stable. "It's like reality keeps changing its mind about what the rules are," she shouted over the comm system. "Our instruments were built for normal space. This isn't normal space." The crew started experiencing strange effects. Time seemed to flow differently in different parts of the ship. A crew member in the cargo bay reported that 10 minutes had passed, while the bridge clock showed only 2 minutes. Someone else felt like they were moving through thick water, while everything around them moved at normal speed. Hyun set up a medical monitoring station, tracking everyone's vital signs. So far, everyone is physically fine, she reported. But we need to be careful. If time is flowing differently for different people, we could have serious problems. The worst incident happened when they were 2 hours from the Velith planet. Yunho, one of the junior engineers, was working on a power relay when he suddenly froze. Then there were 2 of him. One was reaching for the relay. The other was already touching it. Both were completely solid, both equally real. "Don't move," Taejin shouted, running to engineering. He grabbed his portable scanner and pointed it at Junho. He's temporarily phased with himself from 3 minutes in the future. Or the past. I can't tell which. Hyun arrived seconds later. The 2 Junhos were starting to look panicked. One of them tried to speak, but the sound came out wrong, like a recording playing at the wrong speed. She looked at Taejin. "Can you fix this?" "I think so," Taejin said, his hands shaking as he worked his scanner. The dimensional instability created a temporal loop. He's existing in 2 times at once. If I can generate a counter-phase field, it should collapse the loop and resync him to the correct timeline. "You think so?" Minseo asked, her voice sharp with worry. "I've never done this before," Taejin admitted. "No human has. But the theory is sound." He adjusted his scanner and activated it. For a terrible moment, both Junhos flickered, becoming transparent. Then one of them vanished, and the remaining Junho stumbled, gasping for air. Hyun caught him before he fell. "What happened?" Junho asked, his voice shaking. I remember 2 different versions of the last 3 minutes. Like I lived them both." "You did," Taejin said quietly. "Welcome to dimensional physics in practice." "How do you feel?" "Confused, sick, but alive." Junho looked at his hands as if making sure they were solid. "Is it going to get worse than this?" Doyen, who had been watching from the doorway, stepped forward. "Probably." "Everyone listen up." He activated the ship-wide comm. "What just happened to Junho could happen to any of us. We're entering a region where the normal rules don't apply. Stay alert, stay together when possible, and if anything strange happens, report it immediately. We'll figure this out as we go." An hour later, they reached the edge of the Velith system. What they saw made even the experienced crew members stop and stare. Space itself looked broken. There were regions where stars were visible, and regions that were completely black. Not the black of empty space, but the black of nothing at all. Reality seemed to exist in patches with holes between them. The Velith homeworld was visible in the distance. It looked wrong. Parts of it were in daylight, parts in darkness, but not in the normal pattern of a rotating planet. It was as if different sections existed in different times. Mountains floated above the surface in some areas. Oceans hung in the air in others. "By all the laws of physics I know," Taejin whispered, "that planet shouldn't exist. It should have torn itself apart by the But it hasn't," Minseo said. "Something is holding it together. Maybe the Velith themselves." As they approached, a communication came through. The translator struggled with it, the signal distorted by the dimensional instability. Finally, a voice came through clearly, though it sounded like several voices speaking at slightly different times. "Human vessel. You actually came," Doyen responded immediately. "This is Captain Doyen of the Defiant Hope. We received your distress call. We're here to help." There was a long pause. When the voice came back, it sounded like crying and laughing at the same time. "We sent that message to everyone. Everyone in the galaxy. You're the first to arrive, the only ones to arrive. Why would you risk this?" "Because you needed help," Doyen said simply. Another pause, longer this time. Then coordinates came through. "Land here if you can. But please be careful. Our world is not stable. Time flows wrong. Space folds in on itself. We have lost so many of our people already to the rifts." Soman took the pilot controls. "I've flown through worse," she said, though everyone knew she was lying. Nobody had flown through anything like this. She guided the ship down, navigating by instinct as much as instruments. The sensors were almost useless here. They landed on what appeared to be a stable section of the planet. Through the viewports, they could see crystalline structures that had to be Velith buildings. Some were intact. Others were half-phased into the ground or floating or flickering in and out of existence. The Velith who met them at the landing site were beautiful and terrible to look at. They were made of living crystal that refracted light into rainbow patterns. but their forms were unstable, edges blurring, pieces of them occasionally becoming transparent or doubling like Junho had. The eldest of them approached the human crew. Doyen had ordered everyone into protective suits, not knowing if the dimensional instability would affect them more outside the ship. The Velith elder stopped a few meters away and seemed to study them with eyes that existed in more than 3 dimensions. "I am Sareth," the Velith said. "I have lived for 10,000 of your years. I have seen the rise and fall of civilizations. Never have I seen courage like this. You are so young as a species, so small, so fragile. Why did you come?" Doyen removed his helmet so the Velith could see his face. His crew gasped, but he ignored them. If they were going to help these people, they needed to show trust. "Because you asked for help. That's enough reason." Sareth's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been emotion. The others said it was too dangerous. They said the risk was too great. They said we were already dead and there was no point in dying with us. They might be right about the danger, Doyen admitted. But we had to try. Show us what's happening. Show us everything. Maybe we'll see something they missed. The Velith led them through their dying world, explaining what had happened. Years ago, their scientists had opened a small rift to another dimension, hoping to access unlimited energy. It had worked perfectly for decades. Their civilization had reached new heights of advancement. Then something went wrong. The rift began growing. All their technology, all their knowledge couldn't stop it. Taejin recorded everything with his instruments. Minseo studied the Velith technology that had failed to seal the rift. Hyun tended to Velith who were injured, learning their biology as she worked. They were crystals, but they were also somehow alive, conscious, feeling pain and fear just like any other living being. As night fell, or what passed for night in a world where time no longer worked correctly, the human crew gathered in their ship. They were exhausted, overwhelmed by what they had seen. The Velith's problem was worse than anyone had imagined. "Can we help them?" Hyun asked quietly. Taejin stared at his data, his expression troubled. "I don't know. Every advanced species in the galaxy tried to solve this using their understanding of physics. All of them failed. What makes us think we can succeed?" Minseo looked up from her own work. "Maybe that's exactly why we can succeed. We're not thinking like them. We don't know enough to think like them. Maybe that's an advantage." The morning came strangely on the Velith world. In some areas it was already afternoon. In others, night was just beginning. The human crew learned to ignore the impossible sky and focus on their work. They had gathered in a large crystalline structure that the Velith used as a research center. Sareth and 5 other Velith scientists presented their data. Holographic displays showed equations so complex that Taejin could barely understand them. The Velith had tried everything. They had attempted to seal the rift using opposing energy fields. They had tried to collapse it using massive gravitational forces. They had even tried to expand it in hopes it would burn itself out. Nothing worked. Each attempt only made things worse. "We have exhausted all logical approaches," one of the Velith scientists said, her crystalline form pulsing with distress. "The rift exists partially in our dimension and partially in another. It follows no laws we understand. It is chaos given form." The human crew studied the data in silence. Most of it was beyond their current understanding. Earth's scientists had only been studying dimensional physics for 50 years. The Velith had millions of years of research. If they couldn't solve it, how could humans? Minseo raised her hand like a student in class. The gesture made several Velith tilt their heads in confusion. "Can I ask a basic question?" "Of course," Sareth said. "You keep trying to seal the rift by pushing against it, like closing a door against a strong wind. What if that's the wrong approach? What if we need to work with it instead of against it?" The Velith scientists looked at each other. One of them spoke carefully as if explaining to a child. "The rift is chaos. You cannot work with chaos. Chaos must be controlled, contained, eliminated. This is basic physics." "Maybe," Minseo said. "But humans live with chaos every day. Our weather is chaotic. Our biology is chaotic. Our entire history is one long series of dealing with things we don't fully understand. We've gotten pretty good at it." Taejin was nodding, excitement growing in his eyes. "She's right. Every advanced species approaches problems through pure logic and established science. But this rift doesn't follow any established science. Maybe it needs an illogical solution." "Illogical solutions are not solutions," a Velith scientist said firmly. They are guesses. Chaos cannot be controlled by more chaos, can't it? Soman spoke up from the back of the room. She had been quiet until now, studying the rift data with a pilot's eye for patterns and seeming randomness. I fly through asteroid fields sometimes. Mathematically, it should be impossible. There are too many variables, too many moving objects. But I don't calculate every trajectory. I feel the pattern. I ride the chaos instead of fighting it. Doyen stood and walked to the holographic display. He pointed at the readings from the rift. You've been trying to impose order on this chaos using force. What if we create a framework that lets the chaos exist but keeps it contained, like a river? You can't stop a river by building a wall in front of it. The water will just go around or over. But you can channel it, guide it, make it flow where you want. The Velith were silent. Finally, Sareth spoke slowly. You are suggesting something that has never been attempted. Using controlled unpredictability to contain uncontrolled chaos. The theory is, it should not work. But it might, Minseo said. And right now, what do you have to lose? Over the next hours, the humans and Velith worked together to design something that made the Velith scientists deeply uncomfortable. It was a device that would generate rotating gravitational fields with deliberately introduced randomness. The pattern would be controlled by human intuition rather than pure calculation. An operator would adjust the fields in real time, responding to the rift's behavior like a musician responding to the rhythm of a song. Tejin and Minseo built the device using Velith technology and human improvisation. It looked wrong to the Velith scientists. The fields didn't align properly. The energy flows were inefficient. By all their calculations, it should fail immediately, or even make the rift worse. Ambassador Jiwon, watching from a safe distance on another ship, transmitted the human plans back to the Galactic Council. The response was immediate and harsh. The Krillian Empire's top physicist called it a plan devised by children playing with forces they didn't understand. The Thessian Confederacy ran it through their computers and declared it had a 97% chance of catastrophic failure. But Soman, reviewing the design one more time, smiled slightly. Every species in the galaxy has evolved past trial and error. They simulate everything 1,000 times before they act. Humans still test things to see what happens. Sometimes that's exactly what you need. They built a small version of the device first. Jan insisted on monitoring everyone's vital signs during the test. If this goes wrong, I want to know immediately so I can treat injuries. Or at least understand what killed you. That's reassuring, Junho muttered. But he helped carry the device to a minor rift at the edge of the Velith city. The small rift was about 3 meters across, a tear in space that showed nothing on the other side. Not darkness, not another place, just nothing. Objects that got too close would sometimes disappear. Sometimes they would return seconds or hours later, changed in strange ways. One building had fallen into a rift and come back inside out, its interior structure on the outside. Tejan activated the device. The gravitational field spun up, creating patterns that looked random but weren't quite. Minseo watched her instruments, occasionally adjusting a setting based on nothing but intuition. The fields weren't trying to close the rift or push against it. They were creating a kind of buffer zone around it. The rift responded. It pulsed, grew slightly, then stabilized. The nothing at its center remained, but the edges stopped expanding. The dangerous pull that made objects disappear lessened. The rift was still there, still wrong, but it was contained. It's working, Tajian whispered. It's actually working. The Velith scientists who had watched the test stood frozen. One of them approached the device carefully, scanning it with instruments that were far more advanced than anything humans had. This should not work. By every law we understand, this should have failed. But the rift is stable. Not sealed, not destroyed, but stable. Contained. Sareth approached Doyen, the elder's crystalline form shimmering with something that looked like hope for the first time since the humans had arrived. You do not seek to control the chaos. You seek to coexist with it, to give it space to exist while preventing it from expanding. This is not how we think. This is not how any advanced species thinks. Maybe that's why it works, Doyen said. You've all been trying to eliminate the problem. We're just trying to live with it. But the celebration was brief. The main rift, the one at the center of the Velith world, was 1,000 times larger than the test rift. To stabilize it, they would need a much larger device, and someone would have to pilot it directly into the heart of the dimensional collapse. They worked through the night again. The Velith provided materials. The humans provided the design and the willingness to try something that all logic said would fail. By dawn, or what passed for dawn, they had built a device large enough to affect the central rift. The problem was delivery. The device had to be taken to the exact center of the rift and activated there. The journey would take a ship through the most unstable space imaginable. Navigation would be impossible. Instruments would fail. The pilot would be flying blind through chaos, guiding a device that worked on intuition into a tear in reality itself. There was a good chance that whoever took the device would not come back. Doyen stepped forward immediately. "I'll do it." "No," Minseo said firmly. "You need to stay here and coordinate. If something goes wrong, the crew needs their captain." "She's right," Teijin added. "Besides, I designed the device. I should be the one to place it correctly." Hyen shook her head. "Neither of you are pilots. This needs someone who can fly through impossible conditions and make split-second decisions." Soman had been quiet, studying the rift data on her handheld display. She looked up and met Doyen's eyes. "It has to be me. I'm the best pilot we have. I can fly through anything. And if I don't make it back, the ship still has other people who can fly." "Soman, no," Doyen said. "Captain, yes." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I've been in space my whole adult life. I've always known I might die doing this job. But dying while saving an entire species? That's better than most people get." The crew argued for an hour, but in the end they all knew she was right. Soman was the best choice. The only choice, really. They modified a shuttle to carry the device. Minseo reinforced it as much as possible, but they all knew it wouldn't matter much. If the dimensional forces inside the rift wanted to tear the shuttle apart, no amount of reinforcement would stop them. Hyun pulled Soman aside before she boarded. "You don't have to do this. We can find another way." "There is no other way," Soman said quietly. "And even if there was, I'd still volunteer. Someone has to try. Might as well be me." "Why?" Soman thought about that. "Because when I was a kid, I read stories about heroes. People who did impossible things because someone needed them to. I always wanted to be like that. Guess I'm getting my chance." She hugged Hyun, then each crew member in turn. When she got to Doyun, he held her shoulders and looked her in the eyes. Soman's hands were steady on the controls as the shuttle approached the central rift. She had flown through storms before, through debris fields and solar flares. She had landed on moons with unstable gravity and taken off from planets with atmospheres that tried to tear her ship apart. But nothing had prepared her for this. The rift was massive, easily 10 kilometers across and growing slowly but steadily. It hung in the air above the Velith capital city like a wound in the sky. Through it there was nothing. Not space, not darkness, just an absence that hurt to look at. The edges rippled and pulsed like a living thing. "Shuttle 1, this is Defiant Hope. We're reading increased dimensional instability around your position. Recommend you adjust course by 2 degrees starboard." Taejin's voice came through the comm, professional but tight with worry. "Copy that, Hope." Soman made the adjustment. Her instruments were already starting to fail. The navigation display flickered between 3 different readings, none of them matching. The altitude gauge showed she was both rising and falling at the same time. She switched to manual control, trusting her instincts over the failing technology. On the Defiant Hope, the entire crew watched the telemetry. Doyen stood at the main display, his hands gripping the edge of the console so hard his knuckles were white. Minseo monitored the device in Soman's shuttle, making sure it stayed stable. Hyun tracked Somin's vital signs, watching her heart rate climb as she got closer to the rift. Behind them, dozens of ships from other species maintained a safe distance. They had arrived after hearing that humans were attempting the impossible. Some came to watch history, others came to witness what they believed would be humanity's greatest failure. All of them recorded everything. Ambassador Jiwon was on one of those ships, a Krillian observation vessel. She stood in their command center, ignored by the alien crew who considered her presence a courtesy at best. But she watched the displays showing Soman's approach and she understood what this moment meant. If Somin succeeded, humanity would earn respect it had never received. If she failed, humans would be remembered as brave fools who died for nothing. Soman's shuttle crossed the outer boundary of the rift's effect zone. Immediately, time went strange. She felt herself moving normally, but when she looked at her chronometer, it was running backwards, then forwards at triple speed, then not at all. She stopped looking at it and focused on flying. "Hope I'm getting some weird effects here. Nothing dangerous yet, just disorienting." She kept her voice calm, professional. No need to worry them more than they already were. Copy, Shuttle 1. You're doing great. Maintaining current course will take you to the optimal deployment point. That was Taejin, trying to sound encouraging. The space around her began to fold in on itself. She saw her own shuttle ahead of her from behind, from the side, all at once, echoes of herself in different times. She ignored them and focused on what felt real, what felt now. Entering inner zone, she reported. Instruments are completely dead. Flying by feel now. On the Defiant Hope, Taejin's displays went blank. We've lost telemetry. She's beyond our ability to track. Doyun stared at the empty screens. Summon, can you hear us? There was a long pause filled with static. Then her voice came through, distorted but recognizable. Still here, Captain. Still flying. Don't worry about me. But Soman was worried. The rift was doing things to her perception that shouldn't be possible. She saw her childhood home outside the viewport. She saw Earth hanging in space where the Valith planet should be. She saw her own face reflected in the canopy. But the reflection was crying while she was not. Or maybe she was crying and the reflection showed her as calm. She couldn't tell anymore. She focused on the mission. The device in the cargo hold was still stable. That was what mattered. Get it to the center. Activate it. Let it do what human ingenuity and Velith technology together had created. The shuttle punched through another layer of distorted space, and suddenly, she was inside the rift itself. This was beyond the outer effects, beyond the zone where physics bent but still existed. This was the place where reality had given up entirely. She saw her entire life spread out like a map. Every moment she had lived, every choice she had made. But they weren't memories. They were real, happening now all at once. She saw herself as a child dreaming of the stars, as a teenager learning to fly, as a young woman joining the expeditionary forces, as the pilot she was now, flying into the impossible. She also saw futures she would never live. Growing old on Earth, having children, retiring to teach new pilots, all of them real, all of them impossible, all of them existing in the space between what was and what could be. And she saw something else. The rift itself had a pattern. It looked like chaos, but there was structure underneath, like a river that seemed random, but followed the shape of the land beneath it. The rift was a wound in space-time, and like any wound, it was trying to heal. But it was healing wrong, the way a broken bone can set improperly if not treated. Hope, can you hear me? She wasn't sure if she was speaking or just thinking. Time had no meaning here. Solomon, your signal is breaking up. Say again? The rift has a pattern. I can see it. It's trying to heal. We just need to guide it. The device will work. Tell Taijin he was right. Tell Minseo her intuition was perfect. She paused, looking at the swirling chaos around her. Tell everyone I'm not scared. This is beautiful in a strange way. She didn't wait for a response. She could feel the center of the rift now. Not with instruments, but with something deeper. A pilot's instinct. A human's ability to find patterns in chaos. She adjusted her course, moving through space that existed in 4 dimensions or 7 or none at all. The center was a point of absolute stillness in the midst of chaos. She positioned the shuttle there, her hands moving on controls that no longer showed any readings. Then she activated the device. The gravitational field spun up. The random patterns began to pulse. But Somin realized something. The device wasn't just technology. It needed guidance. It needed someone to adjust it in real time, responding to the rift's behavior. That was why human intuition was essential. That was why this had to be done manually. She connected her control panel directly to the device, becoming part of the system. Her hands moved on the controls, adjusting fields and frequencies based on nothing but feeling. When the rift pulsed left, she guided the field right. When it expanded, she contracted the field. Not fighting it, not trying to seal it, just giving it a framework to exist within. On the Defiant Hope, Taejin's instrument suddenly came back to life. Captain, I'm reading something. The rift's expansion has stopped. No, wait, it's contracting. It's actually contracting. The crew rushed to the viewports. The massive rift above the Velith city was shrinking. Not disappearing, but folding in on itself, becoming smaller, more stable. The chaotic pulsing at the edges was smoothing out. Sareth stood beside the humans, the elder's crystalline form blazing with light. She's doing it. However she's doing it, she's stabilizing the rift. In 10 million years, I have never seen anything like this. But Do-Yoon wasn't celebrating. He was watching the energy readings from Soman's shuttle. They were rising fast. Taejin, what's happening to her shuttle? Taejin checked his displays and his face went pale. The device is working by creating a buffer zone between the rift and normal space. But someone has to maintain that buffer. The energy is channeling through the shuttle. Through Soman. She's becoming part of the framework. Can we get her out? Hyun asked, already knowing the answer. Not without collapsing the whole system. She's not just controlling the device anymore. She's integrated with it. If she stops, the rift will destabilize again. Doyen hit the comm. Somin respond. What's your status? There was a long pause. When Somin's voice came back, it sounded distant, echoing like she was speaking from very far away or from multiple times at once. I'm okay, Captain. I can hold this. The rift is stabilizing. I can feel it healing. It's going to work. Somin, the energy readings are off the scale. You need to disengage and get out of there. Can't do that, Captain. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. The device needs constant adjustment. If I leave, it fails, but it's okay. I can hold this until the rift heals completely. It won't take long. Maybe a few minutes. Maybe a few hours. Time is weird here. Somin, that's an order. Disengage and return to the ship. She laughed, and it was a beautiful sound. Sorry, Captain. I'm going to have to disobey that order. This is what I came here to do. Let me finish it. Doyen looked around at his crew. Minseo was crying. Yeon had her hands over her mouth. Taejin was checking and rechecking his readings, looking for any way to save her. But they all knew there wasn't one. Somin, we can find another way. Just hold on. We'll figure this out, Captain. Listen to me. I've lived a good life. I've flown through space. I've seen wonders that humans 100 years ago couldn't imagine. And now I'm saving an entire species. How many people get to say that? This is enough. This is more than enough outside the shuttle. The rift was responding to her adjustments. It was still massive, but it was stable now. Contained. The framework she had created was holding, giving the dimensional wound a structure to heal within. The chaotic pulsing was becoming rhythmic, almost musical. She could feel herself becoming less solid, less tied to one specific moment in time. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session 3 days after the Velith rescue. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from every major species, and for the first time in recorded history, no one spoke for a full minute after the session began. They all just stared at the data. The Velith system was stable. The dimensional rifts had healed. An entire species that had been hours from extinction was now safe. And it had been accomplished by humans, a species barely a century into space travel, using a method that every advanced civilization had declared impossible. The Krillian ambassador was the first to speak. His voice, usually filled with military confidence, was quiet. We watched the entire operation. We analyzed every moment. By all the laws of physics, we understand what the humans did should have failed. The odds were against them. The danger was beyond calculation. And yet, they succeeded. The Thessian delegate nodded, her 3 eyes blinking in that slow pattern that indicated deep thought. More than that, they succeeded using methods we would never have considered. They used intuition, where we would have used calculation. They used adaptation, where we would have used rigid control. They sacrificed one of their own to save an entire species they had never met before. A younger delegate from a species humanity had barely interacted with raised a tentacle. Forgive my directness, but I must ask, why did they do this? What did they gain? There was no profit in this mission. No strategic advantage. No resources to be won. Why would anyone risk so much for strangers? Ambassador Jiwon stood from her seat. She looked tired. She had been awake for 3 days straight, managing communications, dealing with the aftermath, and trying to explain humanity's actions to species that thought in purely logical terms. But her voice was strong when she spoke. You're asking the wrong question. You're asking why we helped. As if help requires justification. As if compassion needs a strategic purpose. My people don't calculate the cost of doing what's right. We see beings in danger and we respond. That's not a weakness. That's not illogical. That's who we are. The chamber was silent again. Then slowly one representative stood. Then another. Within a minute, every being in the council chamber was standing. A gesture of respect that crossed all cultural boundaries. The Krillian ambassador, who had called the mission suicidal, approached Jiwon directly. Your species has taught us something we forgot over millions of years of evolution. We became so focused on survival, on advancement, on logic and calculation, that we forgot the most basic principle, that sometimes the most advanced action is the simplest one, to help when help is needed regardless of the risk. Jiwon nodded, accepting the words but feeling the weight of what they had cost. One life. One human who would never come home. Captain Soman knew the risks. She went anyway. That's what we do. That's what humans have always done. On Earth, Soman's family received her Medal of Honor in a ceremony watched by billions. Her parents accepted it with quiet dignity. Her younger brother Donga stood beside them, 19 years old and trying not to cry. He had worshipped his sister growing up, following her journey from flight school to the stars. After the ceremony, Donga walked to the nearest recruitment office and submitted his application to join the Terran Expeditionary Forces. The officer who processed his application saw his last name and paused. "You're related to Captain Soman?" "She was my sister." "I'm sorry for your loss." "She was a hero." Dongha nodded. "That's why I'm here. She showed me what humanity can be. What we should be. I want to be part of that." The officer approved his application on the spot. Across Earth, similar scenes were playing out. Enlistment in the expeditionary forces increased by 300% in the weeks following the Velith rescue. Young people who had never considered space travel suddenly wanted to be part of something larger than themselves. They wanted to answer the call the way Soman had, but the most profound response came from the Velith themselves. 3 months after the rescue, they unveiled their tribute. It stood at the center of their capital city, visible from orbit. A monument 50 meters tall, made of the same living crystal as the Velith themselves, but shaped by human and Velith artists working together. It depicted Soman in her flight suit, one hand outstretched toward the stars, the other holding what looked like a small light. The light represented the stabilized rift, contained and safe. The figure's face was turned upward, not in fear, but in determination. Around the base, carved in 1,000 languages, were the words, "When all others turned away, humanity stood with us. One gave everything. All gave hope. This is the measure of true civilization." Sarith led the dedication ceremony. The ancient being had lived for 10,000 years, but today the elder looked older than ever, bent with the weight of gratitude and grief mixed together. The entire Velith population attended. Millions of crystalline beings gathered to honor one human. "Before this day we measured advancement in technology, in knowledge, in power," Sarith said, the elder's voice carrying across the silent crowd. "We believed we were civilized because we had conquered physics, because we understood the universe, because we had eliminated chaos from our existence. Then we learned that understanding the universe is not the same as understanding what matters. A young species barely aware of the galaxy beyond their world taught us this. They taught us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. They taught us that wisdom is not just calculation, but compassion. They taught us that the most advanced beings are not those who can predict every outcome, but those who help regardless of the outcome." The Velith offered more than words. They opened their entire database of knowledge to humanity. 10 million years of scientific research, technological advancement, and cultural development. No restrictions, no requirements, no payment. It was a gift given freely to honor one human's sacrifice. Earth scientists would spend decades just cataloging what the Velith had shared. But more important than the technology was what it represented. For the first time, humanity was not seen as the young upstarts, the reckless newcomers. They were seen as equals. As beings worthy of respect, the ripple effects spread across the galaxy. First contact protocols changed. Where advanced species had once approached newer civilizations with caution or condescension, now there was respect. The Krillian Empire, known for its military dominance, sent ambassadors to Earth to discuss cooperation rather than compliance. The Thessian Confederacy offered technology sharing on equal terms, rather than the limited exchanges they had allowed before. But the most significant change was in how species responded to distress calls. Before, advanced civilizations would calculate the risk and reward before deciding to help. Now, inspired or shamed by humanity's example, they responded first and calculated later. Rescue missions that would have been abandoned became priorities. Species that had been isolated received aid. Humanity had changed the galaxy not through superior technology or military might, but through simple, stubborn compassion. 6 months after the rescue, the Defiant Hope received new orders. Captain Doyen stood on the bridge reading the mission briefing to his crew. They had a new assignment, one that no other species wanted. A distant system was showing signs of a stellar collapse that would destroy 3 inhabited worlds. The odds of success were low. The danger was extreme. "Well?" Doyen asked his crew. "Who volunteers?" Every hand went up. Not just the original crew, but new members who had joined specifically to serve on the Defiant Hope. And not just humans. 3 Velith scientists were now part of the crew, wanting to work alongside the species that had saved them. A young Krillian engineer had requested transfer, hoping to learn human methods. Even a Thessian observer had asked to come along, trying to understand how humans made decisions in impossible situations. They called themselves the Defiant, those who refused to calculate the cost of doing what was right. The name spread to other ships, other crews, other species who had learned from humanity's example. Minseo, now the ship's second in command, looked at the mission brief and smiled slightly. 3 worlds, long odds. Sounds familiar. Hyun was checking medical supplies, making sure they had everything needed for multiple species. We're going to need more equipment if we keep accepting impossible missions. Taijin was already running simulations, though everyone knew they would probably throw the simulations away once they saw the actual situation. The math says we have about a 15% chance of success. Doyen looked at his crew, human and alien working together, preparing to fly into danger because someone somewhere needed help. This was what Soman had died for, not just to save the Velith, but to show the galaxy what was possible when beings chose compassion over calculation. Then we'd better get started. The Defiant Hope has a mission. On Earth, Donga was graduating from basic training, preparing for his first assignment. He stood in front of Soman's monument at the training facility, a smaller version of the one on the Velith world. He touched the base, feeling the cold stone under his fingers. "I'm ready, sis. I'm going to make you proud. I'm going to answer the call just like you did." Above him, ships were departing for missions across the galaxy. Human ships and alien ships working together.